Here's a quick question that's been on my mind a lot this year. What is the planet going to look like in 50 years? One of the biggest themes of the past year, besides the pandemic, is the impending threat of climate change. We saw record climate disasters in places like Texas, Oklahoma, California, the Gulf of Mexico, the entire western United States, but we also saw unprecedented action against climate change this year. There was a big summit with all these lofty promises, not to mention record spending passed in the United States. There's just one teensy-weensy little problem.
Even if we get our shit together entirely overnight, which we won't, we can already expect even more climate catastrophes to wreak havoc on the globe. And even if countries fulfill all the promises they made at this year's COP26 conference, and there's no real consequences if they don't, experts say that those measures still are not enough to keep us from passing another temperature threshold with even more worse potential consequences.
And the ultimate slap in the face is that the old fogies negotiating climate policy will be dead and gone by the time the planet starts to feel the biggest effects of the decisions that they're making.
Previous generations have pumped tons and tons of harmful gas without any real consequences, like the ultimate fart left behind on an elevator. Except it's a fart that will kill at least an estimated 83 million people in the coming decades.
That's why we thought it might be a good idea for us younger generations to try to figure out what we can expect from the planet in the coming decades so that we don't become one of those millions of casualties. So with that, we're gonna hop in our time machine, risk life, limb, and our last shreds of hope, and travel to the dawn of the year 2072.
As you step outside the time machine, the first thing that you'll notice is that the air is considerably thicker. Depending on where you find yourself, it won't just be warmer. There will be much higher levels of surface ozone and air pollution in most populated areas. So if you're annoyed that you have to wear a mask to go certain places, I've got news for you. Most days you won't be able to go outside without one in the future. And if you're thinking to yourself, all right, well then I guess I'll just be sure to live somewhere that isn't so densely populated, I've got news for you. For starters, rising sea levels will have made many previously coastal areas far too dangerous to live in, but many inland areas aren't going to be very safe either, since peak temperatures will have turned many previously habitable areas into ovens with a peak temperature of around 140 degrees Fahrenheit.
Around 140 million people will have already been displaced during the 2050s and 60s, and a third of the global population is going to be experiencing temperatures that only currently exist in the Sahara Desert. And that is not counting the second order effects of these high temperatures. Because if you think that the extreme weather that we're getting today is scary, it is child's play compared to what is likely to come.
Warmer average temperatures mean bigger storms, worse droughts, bigger wildfires, higher floods, record blizzards. And it also means that they'll be happening more frequently and often at the same time. People will likely have storm cellars stocked and emergency go bags packed at all times. Sleeping at night with your phone off might be a luxury in the future, since sudden severe weather could give you only minutes to avoid disaster or death.
And with populations getting more dense, antibiotic resistance on the rise, and melting permafrost releasing microbes that human beings have never encountered before, we can also expect disease outbreaks and pandemics to become a lot more frequent.
And when future generations aren't running in terror from a planet that's trying to tag them back, the society they live in will look quite a bit different than it does now. Certain foods we take for granted now, like fish, grapes, olives, soybeans, and so on, will be expensive luxuries, if they're even available at all. Mass migrations and competition for resources like water will make global politics a lot more hostile and isolationist. And with the demand for certain goods being at record highs, income inequality will no longer just determine your opportunities for the future, it will likely determine whether you live or die. Because if there's one thing we can count on to endure the decades, those who are wealthier stand to fare way better in this terrifying future.
While visiting this hypothetical future might be a bit terrifying or demoralizing, it's important to remember that it is by no means set in stone. Yes, the severe weather we're currently experiencing is probably going to get worse, but a lot of the reason why these predictions are so dire is because they're based on the way things are right now, which simply is not sustainable.
And I'm not just talking about fossil fuels. Virtually every facet of our lives has a potential impact on the planet if it's done on a mass scale. That's why we need to start thinking about sustainability in everything that we do, from transportation to food to waste disposal to governing.
But the good news is we are an incredibly creative and innovative species. We're already developing renewable energy that is cheaper than fossil fuels, and we're developing carbon capture technology that could potentially reverse some of the damage that's been done. But if we are going to survive the next 50 years and beyond, we need to stop trying to solve tomorrow's problems with yesterday's solutions. I know after the pandemic it might feel tempting to want to go back to the way things were,
but we simply cannot go back to the way things were. So instead, we need to start envisioning a new and better normal that works for all of us. Because when it comes to future centuries, we either get there all together or not at all. So while you're contemplating that, feel free to watch this for a little inspiration.